What's up, guys? I'm Scott Caverts from the Last Word Music Podcast, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Written Testimony, the new album by Electronica. So let's get right into it. My overall thoughts on the record. Electronica said in the past that he doesn't really believe in making albums, and this is his debut album actually. And the music that he's released in the past, it's come out very scarcely, almost like experimentally. So he actually dropped, I believe it was called Exhibit C, yeah, which was in 2009, and since then he hasn't dropped anything really. He's just dropped some singles and stuff. So there's been a very long wait, and it seems on this record kind of like he's still figuring out how to intertwine tracks and blend them together to make a collaborative story, and add guests. Create this collective album experience because it is his first studio album. So JayZ also, he's on this album a lot. Let's talk about him. He's got a pretty strong influence on it. It's basically a collaborative album between JayZ and Electronica. He's on nearly every track, and sometimes it can kind of hurt him because JayZ's a good rapper and a lot of his verses on this are strong, but sometimes it feels like he's kind of drowning out or outshining Electronica himself, and so it feels like it's almost JayZ's album and not Electronica's, and so that kind of hurts it a little bit. I would have cut back on JayZ's presence just a little bit, but most of his verses are pretty good. Also, the hype and the build for the album, kind of like I talked about before, they didn't really help anything because he hasn't released anything in 10 years, and so a lot of people either kind of forgot about him or they had really high expectations from all the build up and the hype. And I like the album, but it's kind of got mixed reviews so far. And so some people didn't think it lived up to the hype for his 10-year hiatus. So again, back to the feature problem that I was kind of talking about with JayZ. He also brings on Travis Scott on this album, and I don't really think Travis Scott's feature does anything. It's pretty brief. It's just on one song, and it feels almost like out of place, out of touch with JayZ and Electronica's kind of grittier, more old school hip hop kind of vibe, and Travis Scott doesn't really fit into that. And again, it's very short. He's only on one song for 20-30 seconds. So production wise though, this album is phenomenal, top notch. JayZ has you can tell he's put a lot of time, and well, supposedly they only recorded over a 40-day period, which is kind of surprising considering he hasn't released anything in 10 years. But the production is still very skillful, strong sampling, good beats. Overall sound quality is very, very strong. Yeah, strangely though, some of the tracks seem kind of unbalanced. What I mean by that is Fruits of the Spirit, for example, which is a really great track, strong sampling. It's only 90 seconds long, and then Ezekiel's Wheel and the Neverending Story, those are both too long by a couple of minutes, and so some of the songs that you wish would go on longer, you're like, man, I'm really vibing with this, he cuts out quickly, and some of the ones that you're like, this is good, but I only need this much of it, he lets them roll on. There's a 2-minute instrumental chunk at the end of one of the songs, I can't remember which, and it just kind of seems unnecessary. So also, the album deals a lot with Electronica's kind of devoutness and his religion, and he emphasizes his love for Allah a lot, but I don't know, it never seems overwhelming. He does a good job of talking about his religion, and but without kind of overwhelming you, thrusting it in your face, kind of like Kanye's Jesus is King. That was a poor example. This is a much better example. He blends it well. He talks about it from a good perspective. Some people there was a little bit of controversy because some people interpreted some of his lyrics as anti-Semitic, and there were some lines he used from Louis Farrakhan, and those were a little bit controversial and a part of the album. But I didn't feel like it was offensive or anything. It was more just ambiguous for me, which is kind of a problem on some of the stuff here. Some of the lyrics are a little bit too personal for him, that as a listener I'm kind of I don't know what you're talking about. But for the most part, the bars are strong, the lyrics are well written, and just sonically the music sounds good. The samples are good songs, and so overall I thought the album was pretty solid. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was phenomenal. I wouldn't say it was worth a 10-year wait, but for a debut studio album, I liked it. There were definitely a couple of cons, especially with JayZ. his presence was almost too strong. But overall, like I said before, it's enjoyable listen. It's fairly short. There's only like 8-9 tracks, so I thought it was a solid debut album. So for our rubric, I'm just gonna kind of take you guys through. For lyricism, which is worth 20 points. Remember, we have our 100-point rubric. I gave him a 16 out of 20. It was pretty strong throughout the album. Even though we talked about religion a lot, which can sometimes get kind of corny, the lyrics were all, they were well written, they were eloquent, they never really came out as half-baked, and there was a powerful description of like him dealing with the loss of family members on the final track of the record, and that was a good moment, especially if you're looking for like some top-notch lyrics on this thing. As for album narrative and sequence, that's our second category with 20 points. I give him a 13 out of 20 because the songs like sonically blend into each other pretty well, but kind of like I said before, a couple of them go on a little bit too long, and he kind of struggles to figure out like how to put it all together a little bit, and bring in all these different voices and make it like a collaborative effort, because JayZ and Travis Scott on there, like I mentioned, it just doesn't really work. And so individually, a lot of the songs are nice, but as like an album experience, I just gave him a 13 out of 20. So the next section is flow, like how he can follow the beat with his voice and stay in rhythm. Give him an 8 out of 10. There were really no problems on this. It wasn't like incredible flow, but he was patient for the most part, and it was kind of a good counter to JayZ. So I liked his flow. I like the flow of both JayZ and Electronica on the album. Wordplay and rhymes, I give him an 8 out of 10. Both of these guys are vets. They've been around for a while. They know what to do. It was pretty solid. Artist voice and delivery, 7 out of 10. There are a couple moments on here where, I don't know, Electronica's voice seems a little kind of scratchy almost, but, it could be intentional, and it wasn't really like a big deal. There was never a problem where I was like, wow, he's out of tune, or like, so I gave him a 7 out of 10. Features, like I talked about before, I like some of JayZ's verses a lot. Like, he definitely contributes strongly in certain situations, but I gave him a 6 out of 10 overall because the Travis Scott thing was kind of unnecessary. And at the same time, as much as JayZ is a very well respected rapper, he just has a domineering force on this record, and it just kind of feels like his record more so than Electronica's record a lot of the times, and so I think that hurt it a little bit. Production, like I said before, 8 out of 10. It's really, really strong in this thing. I loved a lot of the samples, and the only thing I would say is some of the tracks are too long, but overall, how it's mixed very, very well. Memorability, the last category, worth 10 points. I give it a 5 out of 10, because the truth is about it, I like the album, but a lot of people felt kind of underwhelmed, just especially after like this 10-year wait. And so I think a good chunk of the rap community kind of forgot about Electronica a little bit, and was kind of underwhelmed. They were like, oh man, we were expecting more after, because everybody got really hyped. His initial Exhibit C garnered a lot of praise, and so I think in the end, this isn't exactly a super memorable album. I was talking to my buddies Charlie and Dimitri, who were on the the last video where we talked about Lil Uzi Vert's album, and they were like, Jay who? Like, Electronica is not exactly a household name. And, his first album was mixed. I personally enjoyed it, but there have been some negative reviews, so I give it a 5 out of 10. Favorite tracks on the album, I said, were The Neverending Story, Shiny Suit Theory, and Fruits of the Spirit. Those were the best ones for me. And my least favorite track was Flux Capacitor. And overall, the final score is 71 out of 100. So I definitely think it's worth a listen. It's kind of more old school hip hop, a little bit grittier than, like Travis Scott and the new wave of stuff coming out. So if you're into that, definitely check it out. I think there's at least a couple songs on here that you can add to your playlist. Overall, I enjoyed the album, but you guys should go give it a listen. Tell us in the comment section below, what do you guys think? You like the album, you hate the album? Just let us know. Any other albums you want us to review? We're currently in a search for a new classic album. With the whole social distancing quarantine thing, it's hard for us to make group videos, so we're gonna have to hold off on those. But individually, I'm sure Charlie, Dimitri, or I would all be willing to review any albums that you guys suggest. So just let us know in the comment section below. And again, thanks for watching. I'm Scott Caverts. I've been your host. This has been The Last Word.